Mm. Hi, welcome, and thank you for continuing on this journey together. I am always energized by the opportunity to spend a few minutes to retreat, to renew, to press pause, and to breathe. I have been struck, as I am sure you have as well, by the number of not quite post-pandemic reflections that examine our pandemic behaviors and some of the permanent changes in our lives that are happening as a result. I read one such reflection this week in which a woman confessed that because of the pandemic, she was no longer competing against herself. She is a serious runner who year after year would strive to run faster than she had the previous year, specifically in the New York City Marathon. Due to the enforced slowdown of the frantic pace of our lives in the wake of COVID restrictions, she has reevaluated the pressure she puts on herself and has made a conscious decision not to continue to do so. I see this break to breathe as a way to temporarily, at least, de-stress our lives. I am of the firm belief that whatever the external stresses and strains we may be facing, usually it is the internal demands and standards that most afflict us. Many individuals discovered during this last year and a half, both the tyranny of their schedules and of their expectations of themselves, and have chosen not to return to that model. There is something profoundly liberating about being able to do that. Taking time to meditate can help that process enormously because it causes us to live intentionally in the here and now and to choose moment by moment how to conduct ourselves. While I am not aware of a specific behavior that I gave up and intend to leave permanently behind, I did adopt a COVID coping strategy that has become what feels like an essential part of me. With the initial closing of the JCC's fitness center, I started to walk outside. I walked everywhere I could, and I walked a lot every day. Even in the depths of winter, I bundled up, I bought walking boots to keep my feet warm and dry, and I kept walking. There have been many rewards for this activity, but one of the best is also the most obvious, a renewed appreciation for the beauty and variety of God's creation. This was especially evident this past weekend, as you may remember, in the brilliant sunshine, the perfectly clear blue sky, the magnificent fall colors of the trees, the crisp, clean, somewhat chilly air, and the gentle breeze that gave the leaves the opportunity to shimmer and show off their colors to full effect. It was a glorious weekend to be alive in this part of the world. Sometimes the observation of such natural beauty and brilliance, of such grandeur and majesty, allow us to apprehend that we are part of a larger reality that is mysterious and awe-inspiring. In a teaching by Ellen Umansky, professor of Judaic studies at Fairfield University in Fairfield, Connecticut, I was reminded that the 20th century philosopher Martin Buber wrote of encountering God in nature. Before I share with you some of her thoughts, let's review the basic outline of Buber's concept of the difference between an I-it relationship and an I-thou connection. Very briefly, Buber's main proposition is that we may address existence in two ways, in an I-it relationship or an I-thou encounter. The attitude of the I towards an it encompasses an object that is separate in and of itself, which we either use or observe in some way. Fundamentally, it refers to the world as we experience it. There's nothing wrong with an I-it relationship. The vast majority of our interactions are of that nature, even important interactions, for example, with teachers or doctors or colleagues. Most of the time, we seek something from the it, which could be learning or care or expertise or approval. We might also need to engage in transactions, for example, for food at the grocery store or at a restaurant, for repairs, for cleaning, for any number of transactions that ensure our survival and our well-being. The attitude of the I towards thou is imagined in a relationship in which the other is not separated by bounds, by discrete bounds. The word pair, I, thou, describes the world of relations. This is the I that does not objectify any it, but rather acknowledges a living relationship. I-thou relationships are sustained in the spirit and mind of an I, for however long the feeling or idea of relationship is the dominant mode of perception. What is crucial to understand is the word pair, I, thou, can refer to a relationship with a tree, the sky, or a park bench, as much as it can refer to the relationship between two individuals. The essential character of I, thou is the abandonment of the world of sensation, the melting of the between, so that the relationship with another I is foremost. Let's pause here for a moment and just breathe. And in this moment, hopefully we are not in either, well, possibly an I-it relationship with the computer, because it is giving us the opportunity to meditate. There might be an opportunity for an I-thou where there is only essence together. But let's breathe and just experience that. So let's put our feet on the floor and take our positions. And I have a crink in my neck I'd like to get rid of. Maybe I can release it. Maybe we can all release the tensions that we have in our ears, in our jaws, in our heads, in our necks, always in our necks, in our shoulders. You might give them a roll or two in our hands as we lay them in our laps and unclench our fingers and our palms. Let us just let go of our tummies, nerves that live there, our legs, our ankles, our feet, wiggle our toes, close our eyes or softly gaze, and let's take that deep, full breath. We really are in an I-it relationship with the breath because we observe it and we use it and we feel it sustaining us, filling us, and then observe it leaving our bodies. Once again, we pull in the breath. We need this breath. We need something from it. And that's a good thing. And we can observe how it feels coming in, how it feels expanding our insides. So often I think we constrict ourselves against the outside world, against information we haven't yet received, against hurt or pain, imagined or real. And when we observe the breath in an I-it observation, we can feel the healing power of expansiveness, of opening ourselves up and filling up and then letting go. And we take a few more deep, good, full breaths. Hold it perhaps for a few extra seconds, just enjoying it. And letting it go however it feels best to you, slowly or all at once. Against this background of I, it, and I, thou, Professor Umansky writes, greatly influenced by Martin Buber's I and thou, and particularly its discussion of encountering God in nature, I have opened myself up in a new way to the beauty and uniqueness of particular trees, flowers, birds, and lakes, to give a few examples. Whereas before, I would simply have walked by, barely noticing them. I now find myself, in Buber's words, sometimes drawn into a relation with one of them. In that moment, the tree, the flower, bird, or lake ceases. In that moment, that tree, flower, bird, or lake ceases to be an it. The power of its exclusiveness has seized me. Well, according to Buber, a relation with a tree is undoubtedly different from a relationship with another human being. It too is somehow reciprocal and is therefore a relationship of subject to subject, an I to a thou, instead of a relation of subject to object. And it is in and through this I-thou relation, as through other I-thou relations, according to Buber, that one encounters the eternal thou, that is God. If I understand even some of Buber's thinking, and I don't pretend to understand much of it, an I-thou experience of another person or thing is very rare and tends to be very brief. It also doesn't happen just because we want it to. It happens when we abandon all sense of self, when we lose our self-consciousness, even for a moment. An I-thou relationship occurs when all sense of utility, service, intention, and purpose do not exist and do not intrude. When one's ego is subsumed by a sense of unity in the world that is all-encompassing through the focus on a single individual or thing. The I and the thou are so unified that in that unity, one understands the unity of all creation. It is in that apprehension that God is found. An I-thou experience can only happen in the here and now. In fact, as soon as there is a sense of time or even an external sense of the thou, the relationship is broken. An I-thou experience can only happen when every boundary of time and of space falls away, leaving only pure relation. I cannot say that my experience of the outdoors this past weekend was an I-thou experience. I am quite sure, in fact, that it was not, but it did make me feel part of something grander than myself and quite extraordinary. It made me feel happy that I could witness something so exquisite. It was quite a remarkable break to breathe that I didn't expect in the ever-changing beauty of our world. So let us take a few more moments before we conclude to breathe in this understanding of the different kinds of relationships that we might experience and that might take us to different places, to various places, with the ultimate goal of a place of complete unity and understanding beyond the mind. It's an apprehension of the unity in the universe. Let us breathe in again. There are those who would say that this breath that we take in is part of the breathing, part of the breath of every living thing. And I believe it was Nachman of Wrocław, the Hasidic teacher, who saw the breath not only as a unifying force among us, but as a way of connecting with everything else that breathes. So I could say that better. He did see it as a way of unifying all things that breathe in this intentional breathing in and then letting go. It is something that we have in common with all living beings, with all living things. Everything that lives needs air in some way. Mammals take it in one way. Other living species take it in other ways, and sometimes in wonderfully alternative ways. The plants, the trees, the water all have air or need air for existence. In that expansiveness that we feel, we might imagine ourselves connected at this moment to all living entities. It underlines for me not only the connection, but the interrelationship. We are all part of a very intricate, delicate, and we know very fragile web of existence. By way of conclusion and providing some thoughts for the week ahead, I would offer you this writing from Martin Buber about a tree. This is the famous I, thou description with a tree. I consider a tree. I can look on it as a picture, stiff column in a shock of light, or a splash of green shot with the delicate blue and silver of the background. I can perceive it as movement, flowing veins on clinging, pressing pith, suck of the roots, breathing of the leaves, ceaseless commerce with earth and air, and the obscure growth itself. I can classify it in a species and study it as a type in its structure and mode of life. I can subdue its actual presence and form so sternly that I recognize it only as an expression of law, of the laws in accordance with which a constant opposition of forces is continually adjusted, or of those in accordance with which the component substances mingle and separate. I can dissipate it and perpetuate it in number, in pure numerical relation. In all this, the tree remains my object, occupies space and time, and has its nature and constitution. What would be an I-it relationship. It can, however, also come about if I have both will and grace, that in considering the tree, I become bound up in relation to it. The tree is now no longer it. I have been seized by the power of exclusiveness. To effect this, it is not necessary for me to give up any of the ways in which I consider the tree. There is nothing from which I would have to turn my eyes away in order to see, and no knowledge that I would have to forget. Rather is everything, picture and movement, species and type, law and number, indivisibly united in this event. Everything belonging to the tree is in this, its form and structure, its colors and chemical composition, its intercourse with the elements and with the stars are all present in a single whole. The tree is no impression, no play of my imagination, no value depending on my mood, but it is bodied over against me and has to do with me as I with it, only in a different way. Let no attempt be made to sap the strength from the meaning of the relation. Relation is mutual. That is from Martin Buber's book, treatise, I and Thou. I wish you a week of enhanced relationships of all kinds, whether I-it, or if you have the good fortune, the momentary blessing of an I-thou, to know it and to enjoy it, to apprehend it. I will look forward to seeing you next time. God bless. Have a good week.